So to start things off here, I wanted to tell everybody a little bit about our organization, Wildlands Trust. We're hosting this program tonight. Our mission at Wildlands Trust, we're a nonprofit. We work throughout southeastern Massachusetts to conserve and permanently protect native habitats, farmlands, and lands of high ecological and scenic value. And we do this in order to keep our communities healthy and our residents connected to the natural world. Our work is to protect the land, like is right there in our mission. And we have about 10,000 acres currently across the region. Once we have that land in protection, we have to take care of it. That's called land stewardship. So we take care of the trails that are accessible to the public. We work to keep them safe. We work to keep the wetlands on the trail safe. So things like the bog boards that our stewardship manager, Eric, and volunteer Mike are carrying in that top picture. Boardwalks as well are another tool, keeping dangerous limbs and all kinds of trail work that goes into keeping our trails safe, and then also managing and improving our habitat for wildlife and clean water and things like that. We do lots of education and community work, events like this. We have some in-person programs right now happening at our headquarters in Plymouth, and we work with schools across the region as well, and we collaborate with the towns across our region, as well as the other nonprofits and state agencies that are conservation organizations in southeastern Massachusetts. We have a great network of members, and I hope that some of you on the call are members tonight, but if not, you can join anytime for just $50 a year. 100% of that work directly supports Wildlands Trust mission to conserve and permanently protect land in the region. Your membership also will give you discounts to any paid programs for Wildlands Trust, like yoga, meditation, and when we can gather in person, lots of other programs, as well as local farms and retailers across the region. This is our region here. Maybe you live in it and maybe not, because anybody can join us at these programs from Zoom, which is pretty cool. We've had people from all over joining in. I'm going to show you another map in a second that kind of mirrors this. So take a look. We're in over 40 towns across the region. And this is what the region looks like right now for EEE risk. And that is what brings us to this program here tonight. So across southeastern Massachusetts, you see a lot of blue, which is great. You can see on the key there that blue is a low risk level for EEE. But then we're going to start to see some yellow, that's a moderate risk. Orange is high risk. Plymouth, Massachusetts, where Wildlands Trust is headquartered, is in the high risk area. And we do have a few towns, Carver, Middleborough, and Halifax, that are in the critical risk area for EEE. And I know that Blake's going to talk all about EEE and what it is, but I wanted to give you some context for how Wildlands Trust is interacting with this, and some of the steps that we're taking include not running programs at high risk hours. So we can only run programs between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. in a higher critical risk town. So that's limiting us a little bit right now. We've had to shift some things around for our Plymouth headquarters. And I wanted to introduce Blake, but I wanted to talk about this cartoon a little bit. This is the cartoon that I used to advertise tonight's program. We have a hard time when we use a picture of a mosquito or a picture of a tick or something like that when we're advertising programs about insects. People just tend to be really grossed out. So I was trying to find a fun way to include a picture and still let people know it's about mosquitoes. So I just wanted to mention that is why this is our cover photo for this program tonight. We have Blake Dinius joining us. He's our presenter for the night. He is the Entomologist Educator for Plymouth County. There's their logo there. It's the Plymouth County Extension Program. And we do lots of programs with Blake about all different kinds of topics. He's wonderful. And I'm going to turn it over to him now. And you know what? Now that we have a few more people joining us, I'm just going to let everybody know one more time that you can put a question in the chat at any point during the program, and we'll get to it at the end of the program. So whenever a question pops up, go ahead and throw it in the chat there, and we'll address those at the end. We'll also be able to take questions verbally at the end, but just keep your microphones on mute for now. Everybody is on mute, so just don't touch that until later. All right, Blake, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you for that great introduction. It's been a pleasure working with you, and looking forward to doing plenty more programs in the future. So tonight, we're going to be talking about the buzz on mosquitoes. So all about mosquitoes. And so when I got into this job, just a little bit of background, the first thing I realized is that a lot of people just don't know a heck of a lot about mosquitoes other than just that they bite you and they're annoying. So I'm hoping with this presentation to shed some light a little bit on biology of mosquitoes and just how different and how weird and kind of special the mosquitoes really are. But we are going to finish talking about how you can protect yourself from mosquitoes and prevent bites and prevent mosquito-borne disease. So just kind of a little bit of background about myself. If you haven't seen me at any of my presentations, this is me. I like to do a lot of things outdoors. I don't let things like ticks and mosquitoes really kind of bring me down. It's been a little bit tough this year with COVID. That's a completely different story, and I focus mostly on the bugs. But in a normal year, I really like to get out there, do a lot of hiking, bird watching, insect collecting, butterfly watching. Prior to my current role, I worked with insects and insect research. This is what we would do is we would take a honeybee hive and we would graft the baby bees out of the hive, and we'd put them in these well plates, and we would grow those honeybees and rear them up to adulthood. And we would observe them and kind of figure out like what are some things that could impact their life cycle and their development. So that's a little bit of like kind of my professional background. In my current role, I deliver education. So sometimes people will ask me, do you conduct research now? In short, not really. I do a lot of reading. I read people's research, but I mostly focus on just delivering education through libraries and school systems or guided walks. But you can really just think of me as a lifelong bug nerd. I've loved insects my entire life. I like to hold them. I like to look at them. I like to observe them. It's just a real, it's really kind of just one of those things that just brings me a lot of joy. So we'll first start our discussion on mosquitoes by talking about what exactly a mosquito is. So a mosquito is a type of fly. And like all flies, they have two wings. Most insects have four wings. They've got two sets of wings, but the mosquitoes are different where they have only two wings. And in the place of the second set of wings, they have these things called halteres. And you can see these little knobs on their bodies that kind of stick out. And those function a little bit like a gyroscope on the mosquito. They allow the mosquito to make these like really interesting flight patterns and kind of balance and stabilize that mosquito in flight. What separates mosquitoes from other flies is that they're in this family called Culicidae. And you can kind of see these arrows pointing to those halteres. And then in the family Culicidae, they all have these scaled wings. So that's one of the big things that kind of separates mosquitoes from other flies is that they've got these nicely scaled wings. You can see these kind of like little ridges and almost look like little hairs, like stubble, almost like a beard stubble on these wings. Those are scales. So these insects look a lot like mosquitoes, but they're not mosquitoes for the reason that I covered above. They don't have these scaled wings. You've got robber flies on the left. You've got something that is very, very similar looking to mosquitoes. They're called midges. And then below you've got these crane flies. And some people think of them, they like to call them male mosquitoes, but they're not. And you can see that if you just look at the wings, they have no scales on them. They're not like fuzzy or they don't have that stubble on them. They're very clear and very clean looking. Mosquitoes are very, very old. The oldest fossils that we have of mosquitoes date back to about 30 or 60 million years, but we really estimate that they're probably about closer to 230 million years old, older than birds and mammals. And so when you have this scene from Jurassic Park where they're trying to bring back a T-Rex with using dino DNA from a mosquito, I guess that is kind of why this is called science fiction. It's based in science. What I always like to point out as a entomologist and as a giant nerd is that the organism inside this staff that John Hammond has is actually an elephant mosquito, and that mosquito doesn't actually feed on blood. And in addition to that, it's a male version, and male mosquitoes don't feed on blood either. So in no possible way would this mosquito have fed on the T-Rex, despite the fact that it looks nice inside this staff, and it was kind of the crucial to the entire movie. But I like to ruin movies like that sometimes. Like I'm a real hit at parties, as you might imagine. So mosquitoes are really diverse. So in addition to being really old, we have about 3,500 species of mosquito worldwide. And that's not just a giant number. If you want to compare that to the number of mammals, for instance, we only have about 6,495 mammals. So more than half, it's more than 50% the number of mammals, and that's just mosquitoes. That's not all insects. So there are a lot of mosquitoes worldwide, and there's about 51 species of mosquito just in Massachusetts. If you wanted to compare that to mammals, the number of terrestrial mammals we have in Massachusetts, not including things like whales and stuff that you might see off of Cape Cod, there's 67 terrestrial mammals in Massachusetts. So 51 compared to 67, it's really close. There's a heck of a lot of mosquitoes out there. And they all look really different. I've got this picture of this Asian tiger mosquito on the left. And you've got another closely related mosquito, but a different species on the right. And they might look similar, but they're different colors. They're slightly different shapes. And you can kind of compare these to other mosquitoes like this one here, which is purple, has almost these kind of like leg warmers on. It's like really furry legs. And then this mosquito too is just very, very different as well. We have mosquitoes that you can even find in desert oases, so that you can find mosquitoes all around the world, including deserts and including mountaintops as well. So you can see that these mosquitoes here can be found as high up, like in the Central Alps or Northern Prealps. You'll be able to find the mosquitoes there, which is, you'd think that climbing the top of mountains, you'd be able to escape mosquitoes, but I've got a different story for you. We even have a mosquito that spends its life inside a pitcher plant, and the pitcher plant doesn't eat this mosquito. The mosquito actually helps out the pitcher plant. So this mosquito, it doesn't have a common name. It's called Weomia smithi. It's kind of a mouthful. But this mosquito, it lays its eggs inside this pitcher plant. And what's interesting is that other pitcher plants and other carnivorous plants have these digestive enzymes that they use to digest all kinds of insects that fall into that pitcher plant or fall into that carnivorous plant. Well, the purple pitcher plant doesn't have that. It doesn't have these digestive enzymes. Instead, it relies on this mosquito to feed on other things that fall into that pitcher plant. And then the pitcher plant actually feeds on the mosquito's poop, on what the mosquito excretes. And that pitcher plant eats that, not the insects that fall inside. And so it's kind of analogous to how you have bacteria and other microbes living inside your stomach and your intestine, and that helps you digest food. Well, this pitcher plant actually relies on mosquitoes to do that. But no matter where mosquitoes are, they all require water. This is kind of a recurring theme throughout this presentation. You really want to think of mosquitoes as basically aquatic organisms. So their eggs are laid in or near water. Here's a few different examples of different kinds of mosquito eggs. Sometimes they're laid as rafts. Sometimes they're laid at the edges of where water would be. And sometimes they're laid singly. Their larvae are called wrigglers, and they develop in water. So this is a picture of a larva that I took. They're really, really small. But you can kind of see them in this image where they're moving around. We've got a tadpole in here as well. But these wrigglers, they can move up and down throughout the water column, but they need water to survive. There are no wrigglers that develop on land. While they're in water, they're going to feed on algae, plankton, fungi, bacteria, and a number of other microorganisms, so that you consider them more like filter feeders. But we do have some mosquitoes that will eat other mosquitoes, and these are called elephant mosquitoes. So they're the mosquito that was in John Hammond's cane. You'll be eating these mosquitoes. And you can see this one here. It looks like a giant mosquito just chomping away at some other mosquitoes in this plate. The pupa, again, need water, and you can see the way they look here. We call them tumblers because if you look at this kind of behavior, they're unlike a monarch's chrysalis or a moth's cocoon. These tumblers are active, which is really unique for a pupal stage of an insect. Normally, it's a very sessile, non-mobile stage, but it's different from mosquitoes. And with the adults, they actually emerge from water. So even though the adults are probably the least associated with water, they emerge from water and they need to lay their eggs near water as well. So mosquitoes just can't live without water. That's really the bottom line. They need that to survive. So if you've ever wondered why there are never mosquitoes in Disney, it all comes back to that same theme. If you look at the Magic Kingdom, you've got these nice steep points on the Magic Kingdom, and they're not just to look pretty, they're actually designed so that water doesn't catch, rainfall doesn't catch along edges and grooves, the water just kind of washes off and goes to the ground. And that's designed that way on purpose. Disney is basically built up on a swamp. If you look at where Disney's located, I have this on Google Maps, you can see Magic Kingdom Park up here. And if you follow that down, not even 10 miles down, you hit this swamp. And this is the perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. I mean, all of Florida is basically perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes, yet you do not find mosquitoes in Disney. And the reason behind this is the architecture. It goes back to this guy named Joe Potter. And he was the governor of the Panama Canal Zone. And he wasn't even really technically an entomologist by training, he was an engineer. But by being this engineer and working in these areas, he knew a heck of a lot about mosquitoes. And so Walt Disney requested him to basically work with him on designing this park. And when he designed it with a lot of runoffs. The shapes of the buildings are different. All these different features prevent mosquitoes from breeding and living in this environment. It even goes down to the way that trash cans are kind of laid out in that park where they're evenly spaced. They don't want people setting down trash on benches, so they have a lot of different locations where you can throw out your trash. Mosquitoes are a huge part of our ecological landscape. And so they're food for other animals, like mostly dragonflies and damselflies. They'll eat them. You can see this dragonfly nymph. It's eating this mosquito. It has this nice jaw that reaches out and grabs something like a hand, almost like a scene from the movie Aliens. And fish. Fish are going to be one of the major predators of mosquitoes. And then there are other insects as well that will feed on mosquitoes. If you want to kind of see what a world would look like if we just kind of controlled for mosquitoes constantly, there was a study that was done in Europe where they sprayed this chemical. It's actually an organic chemical called BTI. It's all natural, but it will kill mosquitoes. And so when they ran this study, what they found is that it reduced a large number of what we call midges. Those are things that are similar to mosquitoes, but not the same. And what this did is they tracked the number of dragonflies, and you can see this line on the bottom where they sprayed BTI. It was much lower than the areas where they didn't spray it. And also the number of species decreased as well. A lot of times people want to talk about bats being great at eating mosquitoes. I just kind of want to bring this up quickly. It's a bit overstated. That comes out of a study that was conducted in 1960 where they had basically trapped bats in a room with only mosquitoes. And then the bats ate, first they starved the bats. They starved them for hours. And then they put them in a room with only mosquitoes, and they said, the bats eat the mosquitoes. So that's pretty much where we get that number from, is this study that has a lot of flaws in it. Now, I love bats. I mean, they'll eat a lot of moths and things like that, but when it comes to what's really going to be controlling mosquitoes, it really comes down to the dragonflies, damselflies, and fish. Those are going to be the largest predators of mosquitoes, not the bats. Mosquitoes are actually pollinators, and this is kind of one of those things that a lot of people don't really, they kind of overlook. All adult mosquitoes are going to take nectar from flowers, and the male mosquitoes, they only take nectar. They don't actually feed on blood. So a male mosquito, for instance, is probably about as good of a pollinator as, say, a butterfly. And people are always concerned with saving butterflies, but we've got this nice male mosquito that it's taking nectar from a flower, and we don't view it quite the same way. We even have this plant that is exclusively pollinated by mosquitoes. So they do serve as pollinators to some extent. And so, like I said, it's only the females that feed on blood, and they need this blood for egg production. And it's because insects in general, they don't synthesize sterols. It's kind of weird. And the mosquitoes are going to get a lot of nutrients from this blood, and that's going to fuel their egg production. And so feeding is where they get their bad reputation. It's annoying, but most importantly, it can spread disease. And that brings us to our next point. Well, actually, first we're going to talk a little bit about the mouths. I forgot I added this section. This is kind of cool. So if you look at the default image of an insect mouth, you've got this grasshopper munching on a leaf. This insects are kind of weird, and they just take one part and they'll modify it to do different things. So the grasshopper mouth has been modified in kind of a number of times, and you can see that it was modified into the tongue of a bee. They're all the same mouth parts. Like this light blue is called the labium. You can see it does one thing for a grasshopper, but that's the same part, the labium, which the honeybee uses as a tongue to lap up nectar. And this maxilla, that was used in the grasshopper has now become basically a capillary tube that the butterfly uses to sap up nectar. Now, mosquitoes, on the other hand, have arguably the most advanced mouth parts of anything in the insect world, because all of these mouth parts that were used for basically chewing this leaf have now been adapted for cutting and probing, and they will even be able to find veins and blood vessels in your body. So you can think about what how dramatic that change could have been. So this is an image of basically a mosquito using that modified mouth to cannulate a blood vessel. And mosquitoes are quick feeders. They're not like ticks. They're looking to get that blood and go in and out really, really quickly. So again, that brings us to kind of the reason why we don't like mosquitoes is that a lot of times people call them the world's deadliest animal. I mean, and this is kind of an infographic where it shows the number of humans that maybe kill other humans, which is 475,000 per year. Seems like a kind of a low estimate to me, but mosquitoes may be killing 750,000 people per year. And most of that is from malaria. So you've got about 435,000 from just malaria alone. And the term malaria means bad air. And that's because for a while, we didn't actually know where malaria came from. People thought it was actually transmitted through the air. But here in Massachusetts, we don't really have a malaria to worry about. It's mostly two viruses. So Eastern equine encephalitis and West Nile virus. EEE, or Eastern equine encephalitis virus, is very, very rare. So when you compare it to like the number of worldwide viruses, you had like 435,000 cases of malaria. We just had 107 EEE cases in America since basically for 10 years. We've only had about 107. So, but it's very, very scary because it's very serious. Out of that 107, you had 48 deaths from people who got EEE. So this is not something that is just easy to shrug off if you do contract it. And so that's one of the reasons why we take mosquitoes very seriously around here, because even though it's rare, it's a very serious thing. EEE is not found everywhere in the US. It's found in very focal locations. If you look at, majority of cases are kind of found around Florida and in the Northeast. And if you look at where it's found in the Northeast, it's mostly just Massachusetts. So there's a lot of this colored in area around Massachusetts. What's interesting about EEE is that it starts in Florida. It's the only place in America that it exists year round. And it exists up in this panhandle area because it just cycles there. It just stays there forever. And EEE, it fans out from there. So when we get into Massachusetts, it's because it's moved up from this panhandle in Florida all the way to Massachusetts. And one of the reasons why I have this picture of chickens that say do not disturb is that one of the reasons how they discovered this is by using sentinel chickens. They actually, almost like a canary in a coal mine, they put these chickens out there and would test their blood. And what they found is that this is the only place that EEE, that the chickens were basically getting infected year round. EEE has a really complicated life cycle, and I'm just gonna kind of go over it pretty quick. There's a lot of moving parts. It cycles, the most important mosquito for EEE is this thing called Culicida melanura, the black-tailed mosquito. And this will cycle EEE in birds, but it doesn't really bite people. So even though it's we consider it the most important mosquito, it doesn't even really bite people. Once it's cycled in birds, it uses something called a bridge vector, where the virus will jump from birds using another type of mosquito, and that mosquito will bite humans, horses, and other types of animals. So EEE, if EEE is going to happen in humans, it requires a tricky balance between, Culicida melanura cycling it, the birds population not, being a certain level, not having robust immune systems, and then even another second species of mosquito. So it's a very fragile kind of cycle. So this is the Culicida melanura. This is what we consider, like I said, the most important mosquito. What's really challenging about this mosquito is that where it breeds is in these underground crypts. So if you look at this image on the right, you've got these trees, and you can see these almost like mounds at the base of the tree. There's actually pockets of air underneath that, inside the root system. And that's where this mosquito lives, is basically underneath the ground in that root system, where there's water underneath. And it's mainly Atlantic white cedar swamps and red maple swamps, which is why if you look at the map of Massachusetts, you can see those pockets like Wareham, Middleborough, Halifax, where we do have a large concentration of these Atlantic white cedar swamps or red maple swamps, you do get a lot of these black-tailed mosquitoes. They're really, really difficult to manage. And the main mosquito that's going to bite us and transmit EEE is this thing called the cattail mosquito, Cochleatidae perturbans. I really just like saying that. It's kind of a fun word to say. This mosquito is univoltine, so we get this big surge that comes out of these mosquitoes in the fall area, which is why you often see people kind of on heightened alert in August and September. Has to do with this the emergence of this cattail mosquito, which serves as that bridge, which will transfer it from the birds to humans. And this mosquito, it lays its eggs near aquatic vegetation and actually underwater, where the mosquitoes breathe through, basically cut little incisions into the vegetation and breathe through the vegetation. So this one's also pretty difficult to manage as a larva. We think EEE is cyclical. In times past, it has basically come in years of 3. 2019 was a pretty bad year. What's interesting is that 2020 wasn't as bad as years past. You know, we've seen, you know, if you look at the number of positive samples of EEE, you got about 65, and you only had 4 people. And I said that kind of only 4 people. It's still a lot, but it was a lot less than maybe what we were kind of bracing for. And I do suspect, and you know, I'm not really basing this on any hard data, but I do suspect it had a lot to do with the dry weather that we experienced kind of helping us and kind of working for us in that regard. West Nile virus is the second virus that we're concerned about here in Massachusetts. It's a little bit different than EEE. It doesn't have that crazy life cycle. It's more widespread. If you kind of look at where the map in 2004, it's pretty much everywhere. And it's spread by this mosquito called the northern house mosquito. That's the main mosquito that's going to spread West Nile virus. And this mosquito likes really nasty water. If you look at kind of like this, almost like really kind of tiny, almost like vernal pool, not a lot of fish and stuff can eat these mosquitoes in there, but the mosquito will live there just fine. Likes these, like this nasty pool that hasn't been cleaned out in a while. In fact, the nastier, the better. That's kind of how this mosquito likes it. I want to talk a little bit about maybe the impact of increasing temperatures. I know that climate change is kind of one of those things that is really contentious, and when I give these presentations, I try not to make them political, but I do want to talk a little bit about what would happen if climate change were real. So we would have increased reproduction cycles. If you look at this mosquito, Culex tarsalis, that's a lot like the northern house mosquito that transmits West Nile virus. The life cycle will be 14 days at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, but only 10 days at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And 4 days might not seem like a lot, but if you think over the course of an entire summer, you're going to get many, many more mosquitoes breeding and reproducing, and that's really going to add up over the long term. Faster extrinsic incubation periods. And so what we see here is that, like for instance, West Nile virus, if a mosquito were to bite something infected with West Nile virus, at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, it would take them 15 days for that mosquito to become infectious. So if it was feeding on blood before that 15 days, even though it had taken an infected blood meal, it wouldn't be infectious to people. Now at 86 degrees Fahrenheit, it would only take 5 days for that mosquito to become infectious. So that would make a big difference depending on how warm the temperature would be. And we also would have warm weather species moving further north, and with them, potentially different pathogens, different viruses. So where do we go from here? Well, there's a number of different strategies that we can take and different approaches. We can tackle, you know, the mosquito, maybe preventing mosquitoes from picking up the disease. We can maybe create a vaccine so that even if they're infected mosquitoes, we wouldn't get disease. Or we can focus on not getting bit in the first place. And this is really the aspect that I like to focus on, is this relationship between mosquitoes and people, preventing those mosquitoes from landing on us. And one example of this would be, for instance, the use of repellents. Another example would be covering up. And so this is really important. This is a kind of a nerdy hairnet that I'm going to be honest, like I'm a nerd and I have no shame. And so I'll wear this head net when I'm going hiking if there's a lot of mosquitoes. And I'd rather wear this and get made fun of than end up with bites all over my face. And you can see these people doing work outside and they're covering up as well. There are some mosquitoes that will bite through this, so this is not an impermeable defense, but it does help in terms of it just preventing the mosquitoes from, at least some mosquitoes from biting you. Limiting your activity to the daytime can be really important as well. Well, there are mosquitoes that will bite. Mosquitoes will bite 24 hours a day. There are some mosquitoes that are active during the day and some at night, some twilight. But the diseases that we're worried about are found more often in night and twilight biting mosquitoes. Take, for example, some data that came out of 2019. Out of the number of pools tested, there are 34 of them. There are 428 positive pools. 34 of those 428 were day biting mosquitoes. The rest, the 394, were night and twilight biting mosquitoes. So your risk is never zero, but you can see you can really hedge your bets if you avoid these night and twilight biting mosquitoes. Now, one thing I do want to bring up about this data is that, trapping methods and timing can really skew these results. But overall, this is what we see as like a trend, is that the night and twilight biting mosquitoes, this is really the mosquitoes that you're going to have to worry about the most. I want to talk a little bit about repellents and how mosquitoes actually detect us. So at about 10 meters away, this is about 30 feet away, mosquitoes are going to be using scent. They're going to be primarily relying on scent and CO2. Now, as they move up and as they get closer, they're going to rely on vision, about 5 to 10 meters away. And then when they get really, really close, you can see this mosquito moved up to this black object. It's probably a rock. And they're going to rely on heat and skin volatiles to really determine whether or not that thing that they've been tracking is actually living. And if it's not, then they're going to switch back to scent, and they're going to follow that carbon dioxide trail, and they're going to do that until they reach a person. So what's really important about this is that at that moment, when the mosquitoes are about over 10 meters away, they're relying exclusively on this scent. And this is what repellents really do, is they kind of prevent those mosquitoes from smelling you. So sometimes people will say, well, mosquitoes are still biting me when I'm wearing repellents. Well, if they're close to you and they're using vision, the repellents are not going to help as much. It's going to prevent those mosquitoes that are really distant from tracking you and finding you. So it's important that you kind of choose the right repellent. There's a lot of them. They kind of run the full gamut. The big thing is you want to make sure it's EPA registered. So if you flip the bottle around, you can find this really, really tiny number. That's the EPA registration number. You want to look for the active ingredient. There are certain active ingredients that you really want to pay attention to. DEET, picaridin or I-caridin are really big. IR3535, oil of lemon eucalyptus, and this thing too, undecanone. So like a lot of these, I kind of prefer either the DEET, the picaridin, or the IR3535. They have a lot more extensive data on them. But I know a lot of people, they want options, and so I gave the last two as some pretty good options for people to use if they wanted to. If you don't like DEET, because you don't like the smell, I highly recommend picaridin. It doesn't really have that crazy smell, and this is what's primarily used in Europe. It's very, very effective. But I do kind of want to talk about DEET, because DEET is really really cool to hate. A lot of people don't really like DEET, and I can't really figure out why. Maybe it's the crazy smell, but it's the most common repellent. It's the cheapest one. It's been around for about 60 years, 73 if you include the military. And the World Health Organization estimates that about 200 million people use it annually. And about 18 years ago, they estimated that there were over 8 billion human applications. And in that same period of time, there have only ever been 4 deaths associated with DEET, and those were never ever confirmed. So you think 4 deaths out of 8 billion applications, probably even more at this point, and they're never confirmed. So DEET is fairly safe to use. I would say it's really, really safe to use. And you kind of weigh that against mosquitoes killing 725,000 to 1 million people per year, and fallen coconuts killing 150 people per year. So in terms of people dying from DEET, it's really kind of almost non-significant. But it's important that you follow the directions, because a lot of those deaths, they were kind of traced back to people not following the directions, like maybe a child drinking a bottle of DEET. And so if you follow the directions and do this the right way, you're really going to keep yourself very safe while you're using these products. One thing that's kind of interesting is at the very top, it says it is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with the labeling. A lot of people don't understand that. So if it says like, hold the container 4 to 6 inches from your skin, if you hold it 2 inches from the skin, that's actually a violation of federal law, which is kind of wild to think about. But I mean, you're probably not going to get cops arresting you for that, but that's just something to kind of take into account. There's treatments for cats and dogs. Dogs can get dog heartworm, and even though it's called dog heartworm, you can even get it in cats as well. And then it's important to use the proper protection to treat these animals. So I want to talk a little bit about all natural products as well. So we've got these 25B exempt products. I know that there's going to be a group of people out there that just do not want to use any chemical anything, but I do want to talk a little bit about this. So all natural does not necessarily mean it's safe or effective. And oftentimes these things, they might offer some repellent characteristics, but they often don't last as long or don't protect as well. And some of these contain known human allergens, and the health effects from using these long-term is just unknown. So if you're someone who wants to use these, I'd say it's better than nothing, but I do recommend that you use something that's EPA registered. So what about citronella candles? Well, these have not found to be acceptable in terms of repellency. The mosquito bracelets, like this sonic repellent, or this thing that almost looks like a Live Strong band, zero protection whatsoever. They're scams. Do not waste your money on these things. This thing up here, this off clip-on, well, this kind of excretes a chemical called metafluothrin, which is an insecticide. So you can put this on your wrist and walk around, and you're kind of basically creating this cloud of insecticide around your body. And what they found is that this one actually worked okay when people were sitting still and not really moving. And so if that's something, if you wanted to use this, I just think that that's a little excessive when you can just put picaridin on your body and achieve a very similar result. So again, mosquitoes are aquatic organisms, and when it comes to managing them, we want to focus on that. But mosquitoes really only need as much water as they can fit in a bottle cap. So you think of this, when you're looking around your house, do you have any locations around your house that could hold water the size of a bottle cap? Most of the time people think like, oh, the mosquitoes are coming from this pond nearby, but most mosquitoes fly for about 2 kilometers or less. That's about 1.25 miles. And so when you look around your house, most mosquitoes are probably coming from your house. Areas like your gutters or these potted plants here, or maybe even some of the lawn equipment that you kind of left outside that can collect rainwater. This is where mosquitoes are going to breed. And in these locations, you're not going to have fish and dragonflies and all these organisms that are going to eat those larvae. The mosquitoes are going to breed there, and their larvae are going to live there predator-free. So it's important that you kind of take a look around your yard, and these are some very common areas. The corrugated gutters right here at the bottom are one of the best places the mosquitoes breed. If you think about all these little ridges, each one of those could house a mosquito, and a mosquito would breed in there. There are no fish or dragonflies that would eat those mosquitoes inside that corrugated gutter. And another interesting thing, you kind of going along this line, is that we find that the risk of mosquito bites is actually related to socioeconomic status. So in areas that are more poor, they might have a lot more trash and maybe like leftover tires. We find that the risk of getting bit and getting disease from mosquitoes is actually higher in those areas. But if you wanted to manage mosquitoes around your yard, you can keep the water flowing. Mosquitoes need water, yes, but the water can't be moving. They need it to be stagnant. So if you install these like kind of fountains in your bird baths, that can help a lot. Tossing out water every week, that can make a difference. And installing this kind of runoff that kind of prevents the use of those corrugated gutters is definitely what I would recommend. So lastly, mosquito sprays, do they work? A lot of times people, this is like the biggest question that a lot of people are concerned about. And a lot of times people, you hear people get these ads, these flyers inside their mailbox, don't let mosquitoes keep you indoors, and these companies are trying to make all this money off of you. Is this something that you should buy? I mean, you would think this is fairly cheap, $35 a spray. That's not too bad, right? Well, there was a large-scale review conducted on sprays, and this ran from, they looked at studies from 1944 all the way up to 2018. So it's a huge chunk of data. What they found is that some of these sprays work, but all of them are very temporary, and a lot of times they were very highly variable. They can be 0% effective all the way up to over 90% effective. So there are lots and lots of factors to consider when it comes to these yard sprays. They are not all created equal, and the method of using these yard sprays, you can't just do this and expect the same result by doing it different ways. So remember, we have 51 species of mosquito in Massachusetts. They fly at different heights, they're active at different times of the day, and they're even active at different times of the year. If you look at this map, this chart, you can see all these 80 species. These are mammal biting mosquitoes, and they're found very, very low to the ground. And you have these bird biting mosquitoes, and they're found really, really high up. And so where they're spraying is gonna make a huge, huge difference. So what I recommend, if you do wanna get a yard spray conducted, that you contact our Plymouth County Mosquito Control Project, because they'll do this for free and they'll do it up to 8 times per season. The other thing that our mosquito control project does is they offer free tire recycling. So if you've got all these tires that I've just talked about are excellent breeding habitats for these mosquitoes, they'll recycle those tires for free. And what's interesting about this is if anyone want to kind of take a guess, like I know we can't really answer here, but how many tires people think are here, I thought there might be like maybe 100 tires here, 200 tires here. It looked like a lot, but with the real number of tires here is 4,617. That's how many tires were disposed of here, and it was in one location. And Plymouth County Mosquito Control, they got rid of all of these. And think about all these different habitats, like each one of these crevices is an excellent place for breeding mosquitoes. And so, getting rid of all this trash is one of the best things you can do. It helps your environment and it reduces the number of mosquitoes around you. If you do start feeling sick, my number one advice is you do not Google symptoms and try to diagnose yourself. See a medical professional. So especially in the time of COVID, right? So we've got these symptoms here: fever, chills, cough, shortness of breath. These are all the number of symptoms that overlap with EEE. So you can see there's a number of different symptoms, and even this thing like diarrhea at the bottom, some people even get diarrhea from EEE as well. And so you can see that it might be really hard to know just by looking at things online if you've got COVID, if you've got EEE, and a lot of that could get confused. So it's important that you contact a medical professional, and not only that, that you give them as much information as possible about when you started feeling sick and if it's associated with mosquito bites, spending time outside, or contact with people. So the bottom line is that with the right knowledge and awareness, all vector-borne diseases are preventable. And with that, I will take questions at this point. I know we've talked about a lot and I kind of got through it pretty quick. I sometimes have the habit of talking too quick, so I apologize for that.
No, that was great. Thank you so much, Blake. So for people with questions, feel free to type them into the chat there. Or if you would like to pop off mute to ask a question, that is also fine. You can even give me a wave if you have one and I can help you get off mute.
Hi,
Right.
so I'm actually from Texas, and
Wow.
I've noticed that like the mosquito bites I get in Houston and in Austin are different. So like, do different mosquitoes have different effects like on us when they bite us?
I don't know. Actually, that's a really good question. I know that mosquitoes inject a number of these like basically pharmacologically active and kind of compounds into your body. They really kind of mess around with like blood, vasodilators and kind of promoting blood flow and doing all these different things. And so it makes me wonder if you have like immune responses to maybe some species and maybe a different immune response to another species. I think that that's entirely possible. I just don't know. I'm not having hard data to really back that up, but it's interesting. It's something that I should look into and be able to answer the next time we have this presentation. Thanks for joining us, by the way. That's awesome.
Yeah, of course, thank you. And then also, do you know if like a lot of people say like, oh, people with type O blood, you're gonna get bit by mosquitoes more? Is that true?
So that's been kind of proven and disproven a number of times, is the blood type thing. And I believe it's something like blood type, it might be blood type O that is the most attractive. I can't remember exactly what it is, but basically it was kind of like proven, and then the sample size was too small, so they tried to rerun that with a larger sample size, and they found that it wasn't really statistically significant. And then they tried to do it again, and they found it with another type of mosquito, and they found that mosquito, and then they were like, no, the sample size is too small for that, and they basically disproved it again. And so it's one of those things where it's, I think, overall accepted that that's not really an influence, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the future we see even another study that kind of shows that maybe blood type does matter. I think at least in terms of things biting you, it has a lot more to do with the way you smell, which is kind of weird to think of, but people release all these different skin volatiles and kind of scents from our scent, our body odors, and how hot we run. Like some people run hot, some people run really cold, some people sweat more often. Even just different bacteria types in our bodies produce different scent. And so I think that that's going to impact whether or not mosquitoes find us and bite us more than anything.
Thanks, Sarah. We have Lexi with a hand up. Go ahead, Lexi.
Can mosquitoes carry COVID-19?
No, mosquitoes, well, it's kind of a loaded question. So mosquitoes are not going to transmit COVID-19 to you. I think it's possible that if you had it and a mosquito took your blood, maybe it could somehow end up on a mosquito, but you're never going to be able to transmit it to you. That's been proven that they cannot transmit COVID-19 to people.
Oh.
Thank you. That's a great question, Lexi.
Also, I live in Texas.
You also live in Texas. This is awesome.
That's awesome. Thanks for joining us all the way from Texas. I love these Zoom programs.
I'm sorry that my our maps of Massachusetts and my statistics on mosquitoes are not as relevant to people from Texas. I focused a lot on Massachusetts.
We have a question in the chat from Gerardo with two questions. Have vector control efforts been affected by the pandemic? Is the first question. If I'll just do them one at a time.
Sure. For the first question, the answer is yes. They really have, in terms of outreach and, health agents and, boards of health, they're just kind of inundated with a lot of COVID stuff, and even funding and other aspects have been really taken away from a lot of vector control groups. People that might have focused on delivering like the education like you received tonight, that was kind of has been kind of withdrawn and kind of reduced, and even surveillance work has kind of been reduced as well in this kind of era of COVID-19. And so it is definitely impacted, because if you think you only have so many dollars to go around, and with COVID-19, it's just kind of it gets spread real thin. And so that does really impact like what we kind of do in terms of mosquitoes and ticks. That's an excellent question and a really good point to bring up.
And then along those lines as well, he wants to know if you have seen less or more cases or less or more mosquito activity this year, given that people have been quarantined and staying more indoors.
So that's also really interesting. What we've seen is we've seen fewer cases of mosquito-borne disease here, but like I mentioned, is that it might have a lot to do with the dry weather that we got, which, like I said, mosquitoes really need water. And so if it's really, really dry, it's going to be really, really hard on them. And so what's also interesting too is that some researchers think that even with quarantine, more people are spending time outside. And so it might contrast with the thought that maybe quarantine is keeping people indoors. So I really like to see the data that comes out, and we're probably not going to see a lot of it until the end of the year, is like how many people spent time outside versus how many more people spent time out, indoors, or are people gardening more often, or are people just getting lazy and watching Netflix all day long? It's definitely changed human behavior. But how has it changed human behavior? We're not really sure at the moment.
I can weigh in on that a little bit from Wildlands' perspective. We don't have hard data because we don't staff our trailheads, but we had the most visitors this spring at our trails than we've ever had in our almost 50-year history. The parking lots were, spilling out onto the street. So people were definitely realizing that the free outdoor resources that they have are available to them and are a safe way to, stay active and stay healthy. And the Wildlands Trust preserves also stayed open while others tended to close. So people were kind of funneled onto our preserves is another thing that was happening. But our community garden filled, and we had a wait list for that, and it was impossible to buy a kayak online. Everyone was sold out of kayaks, and basically anything outdoor rec the demand was really high and the supply was really low. So I would say from my personal experience, people are getting outside more, at least.
I would also agree with that from my personal experience too. At least my friends and my family members and close relatives just spending a lot more time outside. But it's possible that maybe more people spend time. I don't know. It's I want to see some of the studies that come out of this.
Yeah,
interesting.
And it's been a problem in the White Mountains, and they asked people not to through hike the Appalachian Trail this year. But I'm interested to see the data as well, because it's all speculation at this point.
Right. It looks like we had a question.
Yeah,
Go
go
ahead. I was going to say, it looks like we had a question from Christine about if she empties and fills the bird bath daily, is that enough? So most mosquitoes, their life cycle is going to be about a week. So as long as you're kind of emptying, like they're going to kind of breed, and that, you know, temperature is really going to affect that. If it's really, really hot outside, they're going to breed really, really quickly. And so, you know, usually what we tell people is if you empty the water about every week, you're going to be clearing that out and preventing mosquitoes from breeding in that. And we do kind of say that that's sufficient. I have had some people telling me that it should be shorter than that, but a week's really just easy for people to remember, just to empty their water weekly.
I had a question about spraying, Blake.
Sure.
The spraying that is done by the county, the chemical that is used, it kills obviously mosquitoes if it touches that. What are the other effects on other insects that it might touch during that spraying? Does it kind of kill everything in its path?
Yeah. So when you're getting like a yard spray done or any kind of spray, that's the thing to kind of keep in mind is that when you're targeting adults mosquitoes, right? So when you're targeting the flying mosquitoes, there's nothing that exists that will kill only mosquitoes. It's always going to have some kind of impact on other animals and other insects. And that includes through Plymouth, you know, County Mosquito Control, if they're targeting the adults. The spray that they use is very, very short-lived. It's called Anvil. And so they'll spray that, and they basically spray a very, very fine mist. It's basically the equivalent would be about a shot glass of product for an entire football field. So it's very, very fine. So it's not that much. They basically turn it and they almost like atomize it. And so the stuff breaks down really quickly, and they're trying to time it with kind of when the mosquitoes are active, like, you know, around twilight and things like that, so that they're proportionally hitting certain species. It's you know, it's kind of one of those things. One of the reasons why I would recommend, another reason why I recommend the Plymouth County Mosquito Control over some of the other pesticide applicators is that they'll give a wider berth when it comes to, like, if you're budding conservation land or if you're budding protected land or wetlands, they give a wider berth between their sprays than some of these other pesticide applicators do, because they'll actually create more distance beyond what is actually regulated. And so they're really careful about it. But, you know, if you don't have to get a spray, then to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't recommend spraying at all. I never spray. I've never had a yard spray, but I do like to kind of throw it out there for the people that are interested and would want to get a spray. I do try to provide that tool for people to use.
That sounds like personal protective sprays and kind of managing the habitat around your area is probably the most effective way.
I couldn't agree with that more. And you know, limiting your daily activity. Those are the three things that are probably the best things you can do more than anything, is limiting daily activity, repellents, and water.
Awesome, thanks. In the chat, I'm not sure the name. I think it's the last name, Idapsis.
So my buddy Larry.
That's Larry L. Dapsis.
Yeah.
Larry. Hi, Larry. Larry says that tick reporting was testing 3 times the ticks per week compared to their 3-year average. So as further evidence that people were spending more time outside. Hi, Larry.
That is definitely increased data. Hey, Larry.
Hey, Blake, great job.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, I remember Dr. Rich talking to me about that, and that they were getting this kind of like deluge of ticks, but it's one of those things too, you know, our people, it's tough. You know, I do agree that is additional evidence that people are spending more time outside, but, you know, is it also, you know, heightened awareness of ticks too can also lead to that. We kind of tough thing to take apart.
There are other proxies that I know people were going to garden centers and they were sold out of bedding plants. People decided to get into gardening. My daughter went to a center to get chicken supplies, and people were getting into raising chickens, and so they were selling out. So people were much more active outdoors this spring into summer than in previous years, and enhanced exposure risk.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely my opinion as well.
Just my humble opinion.
Larry is the entomologist educator for the Barnstable County, by
Yes.
the way. Our
Auditing
next
my
door
presentation,
county.
apparently.
Incognito, too.
Yeah.
Agitator?
Sarah, did you have another question? Did I see your hand?
Oh, yeah. So there's, we see EEE in Florida and then like up in Massachusetts. Is there a reason that it's not in the states in between?
So what's really important is the presence of the Atlantic white cedar swamps. And we actually think that it is probably coming up, like maybe birds are getting infected with it down in Florida and maybe flying up, like carrying infection all the way up to New England. And so we do definitely see it in some of those states. There's almost like satellite locations, I think that is what they call it, where it does kind of show up throughout the coast of the East Coast. But in terms of like focal points, for some reason, it's Massachusetts is just this hot spot where you have just the right combination of the habitat for the Culiceta melanura, that black-killed mosquito. You've got the nice climate, the nice weather. It's kind of it's just a really good kind of combination in migratory birds kind of stopping by and kind of flying through. Just that kind of like all those factors kind of combined is really what we think makes Massachusetts so much worse than other areas. It's really interesting. It's kind of, we kind of got the short end of the stick, right?
Oh, for sure.
Well, thanks, Sophie. I appreciate the compliment.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, I think that might wrap it up. This is a record. We're ending at 7:01. What timing? Nicely done, Blake. Thank you so much, as always, for another great presentation.
Blake, nice job.
Thanks, Larry. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. And if you, if you want, I give presentations like this pretty often. So if you do want another one similar to this, I give them on ticks and butterflies and all kinds of things. You can always feel free to get my contact information from Rachel. Happy to provide it. Happy to put something together for you guys.
I will. I'll put that in the follow-up email as well. I'll put your contact.
Thank you.
And you can also watch some of Blake's programs that he's done for us this spring, including a tick and mosquito talk and a butterfly watching talk on our website.
Yeah. Have a good night, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to log off. Have a great night.